to this here.
Yeah, we're pretty international. Yeah, Lisa, I think you can start.
No, I don't want to start. Good morning and good afternoon. But let's do a little framing first. So this is sort of a continuation from a discussion we had weeks ago on viable systems model. And Jason and I were going to bring some cases that, no coincidences, but both have to do with community gardens. Sort of, Jason, or?
It's a village road repair project, but you tell us your story first.
Well, it's a long story. The work that I do with a nonprofit called the Source School does intergenerational youth-led qualitative research where students interview in school communities each other, their teachers, administrators. And for me, this is really important because it's intergenerational. And it's a way it's a way of sort of introducing systems-based awareness in ways where, unlike my previous career in K-12 as an English as a new language teacher, I was always pointing and labeling in order to build a bridge from a student or a family's prior knowledge and experience, including their values, in a system that I found was focusing on the wrong things in terms of what students were assessed on. I find out later was actually very colonial and limiting because it was a paucity of riches that were everywhere. So people got burned out and innovative that weren't.
You're cut off.
So maybe go off screen. Is that better now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. So the work my internet connection is unstable. It's telling me, so please bear with me. But the work that we do is really about for the people in the system to have their own experience and revealing the systems and how intertwined these systems and layers are. I'm really bringing
We lost you again.
Yeah. Lisa, if you don't share your video, your bandwidth may be better.
Uh-oh. So what do we do? Talking about the democracy. Can we enter into a democratic decision-making process?
Okay, so I just switched to my phone as a hotspot, which will be very expensive, but more reliable. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, so where did I lose you? I was talking about bringing this inquiry, this move toward a qualitative turn in research as education framing and seeding the conditions for the the people to learn systems through living them with each other and sort of mutual co-evolution. What I'm interested in is now bringing this into community garden space. So I also, another layer, because, well, why is because even in schools, there's still a culture, what can be said, what safety we feel around really asking tough questions. So I'm interested in doing it in community garden spaces for a number of reasons. One, it's intergenerational. Something I hear is, wow, at first the kids were destroying the garden and breaking the fence, and then we invited them in to learn about how to build and repair the fence, or we told them they could take from the garden even if they weren't working it. And we noticed the children put their phones down. So I'm also recognizing my own karma in this because the people involved in the gardens are from an area of the city that was, as I heard them say, flourishing at the end of the Second World War in an area known as Brownsville. And what I heard was, oh, these were bodies of culture that were thriving. And then the woman said, but then the city came, and because of the freeway system, people got moved and they didn't have a choice. And it was for a freeway that was never built. So I noticed, like, oh, I'm part of this because that's part of my cultural history. My dad, when he retired, was a county employee working in the division of real estate and the freeways. And so I'm thinking, oh, that wasn't the city, that was the county, and that was my dad's work. So there was that moment of this, like, wow, this is so raw, but it's not the time for me to share this with LaDonna as she's speaking, because I'm an outsider and I'm interested in building trusting relationships. So this is sort of a key point in my case today is I'm an outsider in this work. I am invited to these conversations because of my relationship with a diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging effort within the local Audubon Society that has brought us to invite other people to learn about the land stewardship that we're doing, but also diversify the participation and eventually the board that we are. But it was so personal in that moment, but something in me knew, don't spill your rawness right here. So I'm coming to you with this case because this illustrates, like, it's not time to invite the people who are working the gardens to a conversation like this on systems, right? They are firsthand being affected by the institutional racism, colonial ramifications of poverty and decisions that are outside their locus of control over and over and over. So these are people who are firsthand living the resurgence in community through community garden, through the intergenerational storytelling, through building and sharing true community, and all kinds of powerful stories. So there's this edge to first level, second level that I see in viable systems as holding some clues, and timing is a question. But also, I'm also really coming at this from an archiving standpoint because this particular situation here locally has been the subject of a museum installation called Growing Resistance. And I'm very, very interested in this idea of how do we tell the story as we're living it? And the fact that there are university professors and urban planners and artists involved in cataloging or telling the story of these individuals working the gardens, multi-generational stories, really fascinates me. So that's the case. I know that it's really about a different timescape of what I really want to do is be this kind of observer and be respectful, but also, you know, how interesting that the places I am showing up have to do with a patriarchal thread in my own lineage around my father's work that put bread on the table growing up, and also into the future, my son and grandchildren and how they are affected in because their dad works in finance. And I'm learning more and more about different lenses within the world of finance, where I am really excited about bringing a systems inquiry and the framing that I know to do, especially because of my training in language acquisition and systems thinking for application. There you go.
When you say community garden, you mean public land or privately owned land? I mean, whose garden is this and how people perceive this?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. There's probably about 10 spots throughout the city that I am guessing is county land that is leased for a small fee. So I believe it's either city or county land that is a program supporting, you know, and because a lot of the areas, these are food deserts where, and there's food insecurity. Part of it is connected with groups, nonprofits like the Victory Garden Initiative. There are a series of different groups, but I haven't actually been involved long enough to really know the answer to that. But my suspicion is that it's county land that is being leased for a small fee.
Leased to whom?
To the participants. So say a small fee to garden for the season.
I see.
Low, you know, it's probably subsidized because so there is not a barrier. So there's less of a burden on the participants to come up with the money. Now, at the same time, this is in an area of the city where people are fined all the time for code violations, and this mounts and mounts and mounts. So there's a lot of entangled systems, but this is one that is actually very powerful in the stories that I hear participants telling about basically the differences that make a difference, especially for the younger kids. And also, too, within those communities, I hear stories about people living in subsidized housing are one group, and people living in low-income individual housing. There's a difference how they see each other, and then there's also a difference how they see people who are who they call the Africans, a whole other group. But then I hear a story about two men meeting over, you know, a truck repair, and the friendship that came out of that from one Hmong individual and one African-American individual. And so these unlikely friendships that have come because of this way of being in community around the garden together.
So Arend, Robin, and Ram, do you want to respond to Lisa's question now, or do you want to hear the second case and we discuss all together?
I think maybe one at a time would be better, wouldn't it? Because then we can focus on that.
Okay.
I think maybe. And what strikes me, it's a very similar situation to that which existed in the town which I used to live in, where there were community gardens hired or leased from the local council, and this similar sort of situation. Now, the difference is, of course, that Lisa's focused on developing systems thinking, which was different in that case because there was no involvement of systems thinking particularly, although I think it's a very systemic thing to do. What strikes me, I think, first of all, is there are two important aspects. The first is that it's a focus to bring people together, and it's a focus which has a very obvious purpose, as it were, to grow food. And if, as Lisa says, it's a poor community, then growing food is obviously very important to them, and therefore there's great motivation to do that. Now, I mean, what I think is important from a systemic point of view is the way in which, in a sense, is to get the people to think about their interaction. So I don't know if that's possible, but that's where systems thinking comes from. Can they think about their own relationships between each other, the fact that they are developing friendships, that sort of thing. So those seem to be the two important things here. The fact that it's a purposeful activity which people can see easily, and from a systems perspective, it's good to try and perhaps bring them to understand that those relationships that they're developing are really important. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so. And Robin, this other layer of archiving is really interesting to me. The fact that this is being adjunct, is that a verb? Adjuncted, captured in an artful expression, a series of artful expressions of participants. And the fact that it's a curated space is also super interesting to me because, I mean, how I met Jason actually is through an archiving archiving work through the ASC and the ISSS. So this other layer, I'm just holding this other layer of curiosity around archiving because my interest in that archive is not only to capture all of the work of the past, but also how we mount it, how we invite young scholars and middle and high schoolers to access this rich legacy of inquiry in what we call complex adaptive systems at this time when they are no longer adapting.
I think yes, I agree with you. That is very important. One thing that they did do in the town where I was a town called Todmorden in West Yorkshire in Britain, and the initiative was called Incredible Edible. I mean, you can find it online easily. They did document it, and that I think is very important because that then gives outsiders the chance to see success, if you like. I mean, if that, because I mean, certainly Incredible Edible was a very successful initiative. It's been going for 20 years, I would think, something like. But I think because it was documented, people can see what's going on and what's happening, and there are some writing about it. There is some writing about it. So yes, I agree. It's important.
And just as one quick follow-up to that, I'm also really interested in what that experience is like for people who know that they are being part of this exhibition. So in other words, like we're always so quick to go into implementation, and where I really recognize my strength is to continually be framing. And so I think that my participation in this is always going to be sort of from an observer kind of standpoint, because the people doing the projects are very capable, and it's a different body of culture than the one that I am coming from. But I'm always really wondering about the invitations and
I would say that too. I mean, I think one thing I remember is that if exhibitions were mounted and students were participating, did write up things for an exhibition, they were very pleased and proud to do so. So that's also another important motivation, if you like. And I think, yes, I agree. That's also a very good aspect of this kind of thing.
And so as we go on, I guess with other participants, I'd also like to really focus on the kind of listening that you see as really important in working with the viable systems model, especially if it's not yet with first line participants.
Yeah, well, again, I think it's about language, isn't it? I think that's the important thing, is to have the language and the concepts. And I think in our sort of Western society that we don't, that's not an easy thing, because I think if you are doing systems thinking, then you are thinking about processes. And we tend to think in the Western world much more about objects than we do about processes. So trying to get people to think in terms of the verbs, as it were, which describe processes, is very important. And I think that when I've been teaching system thinking, that's an important step, which I find some people find it very difficult to make. So,
yeah, and how to take advantage of natural law, which is really all about the garden and place, right? The cultural landscape as a voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to comment? I seem to be talking.
I have hi, Lisa. I'm trying to think about this issue. But there are two major things, right? One is the desired outcome, and the other one is what are the bottlenecks that are stopping the desired outcome from happening. Now, if you start with a very, very large universal goal of transforming the whole society and making everybody live harmoniously together, that is a tall order. So I'm trying to understand what are like small steps in terms of desired outcome. And for each one of those, what are the immediate bottlenecks, both in terms of people and resources? And start with small steps and start implementing a systemic process. That's probably how I would approach this issue. Do you want to comment about it before I go further?
No, I'm very interested because I think my goals and outcomes are different than the projects. So
Right.
like I said, my goal and outcome is to imagine doing what we do in the source school in terms of youth-led ethnographic qualitative research. And actually we use a program that is AI related. So, that is a transcription program. And then the students and the teachers learn coding for themes. And
Right.
but the really interesting thing is you know, when I ask the students, have you ever used technology this way? And they're like, no, you know, so it's a different, again, the frame is constantly shifting. So my goal would be maybe eventually to build this kind of youth-led qualitative research in the summers with students this way, but that is way long-term. And it will also depend on me telling the story to funders, because what we really like is trust-based funding rather than, okay, here are the program goals, because we don't know, you know, we use a model of change that's very much based in the Theory U model, but that's just one. So that's a really good point, Ram. I appreciate that. But I think I don't actually really know, other than food and intergenerational relationship. I think those are the program goals, the growing resistance, community organization. But mine are another layer, again, of abstraction.
This second layer of this second layer of abstraction is essentially your students looking at the garden and then sort of documenting it and reporting back on what they see. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking about?
I think so, because every hair follicle on my arms and shoulders just got very excited when you said that. So yeah, yeah, that. But also too, like, right, my training was a teacher, and like I said, labeling things. And so the invitation for me is to first build those relationships as a listener, a trusted interlocutor, contextualized interviewer in a way that is not telling, oh, that's this, oh, that's this. So coming out of my mindset of teacher and being sort of this different space of truly offering the space.
Mm-hmm. Would just trying to get it straight in my own mind. So in a sense, you're the teacher, you've got the students are studying the situation and thereby, if you like, documenting it, which they may very well want to do an exhibition about, which they could show to the gardeners. Mm-hmm. So that gives a nice circle. But you're introducing systemic language with the students, and some of that systemic language will probably rub off on the gardeners, I suspect. Even if you don't do anything, well, I mean, that seems to be a sensible way to go. Is that the sort of scenario you're envisaging?
Yeah, I think it is just more and more about the space between us, like these, let's say, islands of trust.
Yeah.
And how we can connect those more and more. Especially, right, I am, you know, to look at me, you don't know my history of othering, of being othered, right? In this white body with light hair, you know, no one knows the complexity of my experience as being an outsider or not included, or, you know, so, right, so sort of just seeding the conditions for students to have a sense of being able to express themselves wholly.
Mm. So in a sense, you've got the trust between yourself and the students to try and manage, and also the trust between the students and the gardeners, as well as your own relationship with the gardeners, kind of thing. So there's a kind of quite a complex management. Mm-hmm. So it's clear that, I suppose, for me, it would be important to get those various relationships straight in my head, kind of thing, and be able to watch them. I mean, that's the systemic side, because the systems thinking is about relationships.
Yeah.
Arend?
Yeah, thank you. I was listening and I was thinking, is it so difficult to be simple? Like Carl Gustav Jung said, you know, we need to simplify this. I think, Lisa, it becomes more and more complex the longer you talk about it. To me, at least. What is the purpose? What do we need to achieve and get to that purpose, to achieve that goal? And then you start collecting things. Maybe that's maybe an easier way to do it than rather, you know, going over this systems thinking approach for people who are not really aware of systems thinking, first of all. So pragmatism I miss in this conversation, you know, as a goal getter. What's your take on that?
Well, actually, it's embedded. So every model I've ever run, basically, from the system as it is now and what it could be, ends in that the whole power system shifts when the children look to the land and its story. So I have been working very much with the understanding of when we have our fingers and toes in soil, we are connected. I have this deep relationship with the land you see behind me over years of working it and adding trees and understanding the land that was held sustainably for 700 years and that's alive for me. And there are artifacts that show me this. So I appreciate what you're saying, right? I am coming in as this outsider because frankly, I'm not part of that system, really. I'm not a trusted ally at this point. I haven't done anything to muck that up yet, though. So I've been listening and attending some of the gatherings. But yeah, I do have this level of view that's, you know, both zooming in and zooming out. So I haven't been working the gardens there. I've been receiving the stories. And I appreciate what you're saying. I think that it's going to take a lot of time. It's a different timescape than I'm normally probably used to. I think I'm in it for the long haul. But I think that really, I think it'll become more alive when I'm actually with the participants working in the soil. But the fact that that is about soil is a big, big, powerful bonus for whatever is going to be.
Yeah, I know, because I just dug over our garden here, preparing for summer growth. So I was in the soil. Right?
Yeah, right, right.
So yeah, you know, it's always like time, you know, time and the use of time in the most pragmatic way, I think. Because otherwise we lose too much time by contemplating too long without doing things. That was my approach.
Yeah, and so that's really an interesting point that I've been sitting with too, is this difference between deep time and ecological time and this geosphere versus the time space that children are in now because of technology. And you know, when I heard, oh, they put their phones down and they started listening to the stories of folks who grew up in the South and are here up in the North now, and what that means. So I am like really cognizant of this way of time, but then again, there's this funding space of how you fund projects that aren't always about we don't know what we're going to get, but come, you know, fund us and we'll see. So like my ultimate goal, Arend, is really actually around redesigning philanthropy, but that's another piece of
that's your main purpose then.
But it's held as a result of 3 other systems, which is arts and education. Yeah.
Good, because a clear purpose is always key. this is where I want to go, and this is the requisite variety I need.
Oh, funny you say that, because requisite variety has been, just that term has been waking me up in the middle of the night.
Lisa?
Okay, who else? We have a few friends here needs to leave earlier. So
Oh.
let's catch up.
Ron was just about to say something and then hear from
Yeah,
others.
just-
Ram, go ahead.
Take a couple of minutes to wrap up. See, I came to this whole group with the starting, trying to explain my understanding of how brain works based my understanding. But what I got, what I have understood is brain has a dual charter. One is to categorize and the other one is to classify. There is differentiate and integrate. Which differentiation you can also think of it as out of the 6 million pixels of things that are coming into my eye, only a few that I need to pick up. That's what we are trying to call a signal, right? Now, we teach that to the children. To my grandchildren, the first thing I do is turn on the light switch on and off and say, here is light and dark, which you can expand it into black and white. So we are teaching the children to differentiate. It is very important. If they cannot do that, if they get just overloaded with sensation, then we actually sort of brand them as artistic, right? They can't see the signal from the noise. So on the one hand, it is necessary to do the differentiation. But on the other hand, you also need to be able to somehow classify some of these features that you have extracted into an object or as some kind of a larger entity. And that is where the whole understanding and trust, all those things come about from the second part, from the classification. So what I'm getting at is you cannot eliminate differences. Differences are necessary. It should be understood. That is how we can see the world. But on the other hand, what we need to be teaching the children is, hey, the color of the person or how long somebody has lived here, what is their wealth? Each one of these is one attribute by which we create a certain feature and we differentiate the society. But what we need to see is when we deal with two individuals, we need to see the multitude of attributes that individual carries and see the person as a system. How can a subsystem can deal with the other subsystem and establish a trust? And that is what we're calling systemic thinking or cybernetics, is communication and control. And that part is what we need to be teaching these children. Differentiate, but also figure out how to take multiple attributes and make a big picture. And that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, thanks. The idea of holism
Yes.
Is real important in my work and understanding. So I really appreciate that. And for me, I'm just naturally very appreciative. And that's how I come at things. And so that I'm finding more and more ways to bring spiritual understanding through secular language. And that's one of the ways. The other thing that informs me is a systems view of life from Capra. And most especially recently, conversations using appreciation, influence, and control from a holism as in organizational development. So I appreciate your pointing that out.
Thanks.